Too.
All right, go over to Matt, introduce yourself and start the presentation.
Very cool. Before I do that, Scott, if you don't mind giving me share rights, that would be cool so I can share my screen. I don't see it up on see it up.
Matt, you're a co-host, so you should be able to.
I haven't been in Zoom in a while. What's it under these days? Which tab?
Uh, Look down at the bottom of your screen. There should be a big green bar that says sharing.
Ah, it just appeared. There we go.
Victory.
All right. Woo woo. All right. Tell me when you can see my screen.
We're with you.
Awesome. I appreciate it. So I am gonna, let's see this back over here. So I can't see the chat at this point. So Scott, help me with that, please.
Yeah, if there's anything that comes up in the chat, I'll let you know. But this is
Perfect.
probably a small enough group. Just raise your hand or come off mute if you have a question.
Yeah,
Let's do it that way.
that's totally cool. There we go. I got it back. Yeah, I'm a Teams guy, so trying to get into it. So, hey, good evening, team. Matt Mason, privileged, honored to be here tonight. I want to thank Scott for the opportunity. Just by way of thanks and introduction, Scott and I worked together at Truist Financial. Scott was my measurement guy, and always appreciative of the hard work and the partnership there. Marissa, great to see you on here. Marissa and I worked together in talent and HR, and then Lisa and I have the longest history on this call. I think Lisa, we go back to early 2000s together, maybe. I can't remember, but we won an ISPI award somewhere in the 2000s, maybe 2012. I don't remember,
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
work that we did at Lowe's together. And so always appreciative of this organization. And thank you for the rest of you folks for having me. I was, of course, honored when Scott asked for me to jump on. Um, I'll get to my introduction here in a minute, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I got here to this sort of topic. And it really started with a conversation that I had with my oldest son, who's headed off to college next year. And it was last year during the holiday season, and we were going to see family out of state. And there's lots of politics and fun with this particular family. And the way that they do things is there's an adult table and there's a kids table. And for his entire life, he has sat at the kids table, and he is the oldest grandchild by a long shot. And the youngest grandchild at the time was a year old. So you've got a 18-year-old and a 1-year-old at the same table, and he was really feeling it. And as we were getting ready to go on the trip, he said, "Hey, Dad, can I ask one thing?" And I said, "What is it?" He said, "I think it's my time, my year. I'm 18. I'd like to be at the adult table." I said, "Well, we'll have the conversation and we'll talk to the in-laws about this, but tell me why." And he said, "I've earned that right. I have put in my time. I have done what I've been asked to do, and so I would like a seat at the table." And he ended up with that seat. He did amazingly well. He's an old soul to begin with, so he did great. And so that's how I got to this presentation. As I was thinking about AI and all the stuff that's going on and leadership around that. Part of what you're going to hear me talk today is our place and role at the table. And so I really want to make this an interactive conversation as we talk through a couple of things. So I'll do a quick introduction in a minute so you know a little more about me, but that second bullet is really talking about the HR, the talent, or the learning seat at the table. And some of the stuff that we're all experiencing. So I want to have a real great open dialogue about this. And then I'm going to provide some thoughts around things I see that are working to keep that seat at the table or to get that seat at the table. And then really second part of this is I believe the model for all of us moving forward is really the servant leadership model. And we'll talk a little bit about servant leadership. It's something I'm really passionate about. It's something that I write about on LinkedIn. If you don't follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn and you are interested in what I'm talking about tonight and want to extend the conversation, I write usually 4 or 5 times a week. And my general platform is around servant leadership or things going on in talent and learning. And then really the last bullet is I just really want to have a two-way dialogue as we're going through tonight. So a little bit about me. On the left-hand side, you can see, I'm currently with Truist. I have the privilege of leading the talent operations office in the talent space. And so talent at Truist is a really interesting time because we've merged classic talent acquisition, executive recruiting, university recruiting, internship, succession, performance, learning and development, and the operations office team. That's the team that I lead. And the responsibility there is anything the talent group needs, policy, procedure, legal support, cyber tech needs, project management, budget, forecast, any of those sort of guidance pieces. Strategy is also in my space. The team provides it and do an incredible job. You can also, so a little bit about my background. I spent most of my life as a classical scientist and geneticist. I went to the Ohio State University. I was a grad student professor there. I taught genetics and biology. I was also a science instructor as part of my career here in North Carolina, and then have been in lots of different industries from higher ed, retail, telecom, defense and space, manufacturing, and now banking, and currently sitting as the leader of the talent operations office. QR code will get you to LinkedIn if you have an interest in following me, and I would love that. So I alluded to this earlier. We are all sitting at really kind of a cool time in history. I was at a conference 3 weeks ago, was fortunate to be a main stage panelist at the conference. And but the real fun and cool part was sitting in the audience listening to presentations, and a whole lot around AI, specifically AGI, which is really the next iteration of what's coming, and heard from some of the foremost leaders in the space and folks that are doing it. Heard for the first time a vendor say out loud, if you buy our product that does AI content development, we have an AI coach you can talk to, an AI product that builds virtual journeys. Now, I don't know how awesome they are. It's a product we would all know and love if I said it out loud. I'm not going to, because this is an advertisement for them and I don't get paid for saying it. But it's a very, very well-known product in the learning space. And the vendor was talking about these things. And for the first time, I heard a vendor say, and if you buy these products, we will help you realize how many FTE you no longer need. It's the first time I heard a vendor say that out loud. And I've had follow-up conversations with them and to understand this algorithm of where all of this is going. And so I naturally go, oh, not only for myself and career, but my team, but also my kids. And so we're really sitting in an interesting crossroads today of things coming at us in the talent, the learning, and the HR space. So I just want to pause. Let's use chat. Let's have some fun. As you're sitting at the table in your role, what do you see as part of the crossroad that's hitting your organization? In the chat, what's coming at your organization that you see as part of the crossroads these days? Yep. Yep. AI, generational differences, expectations, mission to border security. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Marissa's point's interesting. I had lunch with a really good friend of mine today that works in a consulting firm, and they're already seeing a shift in organizations where AI is not a problem. where turning it on does not make people nervous. And a lot of these are boutique or even large consulting firms in the talent acquisition space. And he was telling me about a one-man band, and it was a gentleman, so it was a one-man band who hired 500 people in a week, never spoke to a single person, and used AI for the entire thing. AI to read resumes, AI to uh, look at video responses to questions that all the candidates had to respond to, and presented a slate back to the company of 500 individuals. It's crazy what's coming. Preserving proprietary information while trying to leverage AI. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Um, I thought, as we're talking about the crossroads, I'm a big AI user in my personal life. I work for a bank, so we don't have it at the bank. We have a version of it, but it's really truly not Gen AI just yet. But I use ChatGPT at home and other forms of AI tools to live my personal life. And so I went out and I said, all right, hey ChatGPT, help me with some research or some metrics in the last, I think I told it 18 months around this topic. And here's what it told me. And I'm going to kind of go through the 5 bullet points. It said this, right now, 94% of HR leaders report that their team is viewed as a key business driver. This is up, 24% from 3 years ago. So we're leaders are saying, yeah, we're needed, but the alignment gap is quite interesting. 50% of the organizations in a particular survey are delivering HR programs that are not aligned to any business goal. And we're going to talk more about that, because to me, that's one of the big problems. Perception disconnection. According to the Lattice study, 27% of executives outside of HR believe that only 27% believe that HR significantly impacts revenue growth, versus the 53% of HR leaders who believe they actually do. So there's a big disconnect there. Talent strategy drivers from McKinsey. They show that when you put talent at the center of business strategy, meaning there's alignment between what talent does and where the business is going, they saw 1.5x top tier financial year over year. And then the last is learning yields. We've seen lots of statistics. The latest one is the one you see here. Comprehensive training programs, 218% higher income per employee, and 24% higher profit margins for the company over formal company or companies with formal programs. So let me just net that out again. HR is viewed as business driver, but 50% of the orgs are not delivering on what the strategic alignment is. 27% of the folks in the business say HR doesn't have an impact. Talent within the business unit can actually increase things financially. And if we have training programs, we see a 218% increase and a 24% growth in profit. So to me, there's a dichotomy here, and I'm starting to feel it around the seat that HR talent and learning have at the table. I believe we have a right at the table. We have to earn that right, like my son. But I think there's a lot of things that are out there that are distracting us from that seat. And I'm going to talk about some things tonight that I think help us get the seat, keep the seat, and then help the business understand the value of our seat. But I would be remiss if I didn't say, let's talk a little bit about AI. This particular graph comes from a guy named Tim Urban. Tim is a thought leader in the AI space. You can go out and take a look at this. And I thought this graph was particularly interesting because to me, I think AI has become a big distraction among a couple of items. But what this says, what I thought was interesting about it is the y-axis is intelligence, meaning how well does the tool do compared to, and he's got some very interesting bars on there from chimpanzee, even through Stephen Hawking, and then the x-axis is time. And it really shows this sort of like the blue line is the assumption, the red line's what actually is happening. And then the point in time today, and I agree with this, there's a shift happening where people are becoming unbelievably surprised by what it can do as we're shifting from the artificial narrow intelligence that we see machine learning and some basic AI tools to artificial general intelligence, where machines can understand and learn and apply not only from what human input, but also from themselves. And then they get into ASI, which is really the future of what's coming. And the six drivers you see there, and Tim goes on to talk about this in some of his articles, that chip performance is going through the roof. Data that we're all putting in or that it's collecting is going through the roof. Networking of knowledge systems, not only private, but public systems, financial investments. If you go talk to your financial planner, they're going to talk to you about investing in either ETFs or individual stock sources around AI. Because if you get it right, it's a lot like Tesla. They're on the move. A lot of investment. AI is actually helping itself to research itself, and AI is helping to create itself. And so this red line of increase is crazy. And at this conference, one of the leaders in the space from Google was talking about what they're seeing, and they said what they predicted 2 years ago is already been showing up and blowing out of the water. So um, let's just pause. In the chat, talk to me a little bit about, or come off mute. I'm good either way. How are you seeing AI impact what's going on in your work?
Here at the Coast Guard, part of modernized ready learning is using AI, but just exactly for what? Not exactly sure. And the results I've seen is more on the disappointed curve. I'm like, we probably could have done that better, but at the end of this project, you could say this training used AI to get developed, and I'm like, that doesn't necessarily make it better or faster.
Yep.
You're just claiming you use just Chat GPT to help create objectives or a lesson plan or things like that, which it's pretty good at,
Yeah.
but it's AI for the sake of AI and not really a clear reason. So I think, the Coast Guard's more probably to the left in that. Will it get better? Perhaps.
Yeah.
But you got to have a problem or opportunity that AI can solve. It's like any technology.
Yeah.
You have to find the problem or opportunity. You shouldn't be using it just for the sake of it. Everybody's using it.
Yeah. If you want to read more about something you said around disappointment, Gartner is doing some interesting stuff. If you have access to Gartner, go out and read. And you can actually Google and find the graphic. It's a lot like buying a new car or a house or whatever you're into. You buy some fancy piece of jewelry. They actually have a pretty interesting change. It's basically a change curve around, you're really excited, and then this sort of despair of, oh, I got this thing that's really not working. And they're doing a lot of writing around working in that lower space and understanding that before companies start investing in these technologies. Of course, Gartner would want to do this because that's where they get a lot of their money from. But quite interesting research. We have them at Truist, and they've shared a lot of that with me. Lisa, you mentioned AI text to speech. What are you seeing as you and Matt are pursuing this?
Sorry, I was just eating some dinner off camera, but especially like in e-learning, where you have the voiceover narration, tools like Well Said Audio, and now certainly Articulate Storyline has thousands of voices, and they are very, very good. And then you don't need the professional audio talent going into a studio. If 6 months later you want to just change out a couple clips, it's easy to do it. You just grab the same AI voice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mark said summarization of individual assessments. Yeah.
Yeah, I found so this is something, part of a project I'm working on at ISPI, looking at award recommendations and stuff like that. And it's been an interesting shift really over the last couple of years, saying how do we resolve and actually understand differences in opinions about someone's application for a given award. And I've found, and it's just a simple Chat GPT response is pretty illuminating without being definitive. I mean, we still have to apply human thought to it, but it does a pretty good job of pulling together a rather verbose review and a short review and stuff like that, where we know length doesn't really affect quality. It kind of shakes out the differences. So I've been looking at it very intensely over the last year, and found it to be a very reasonable aid, but nothing I'd press the button on and say, okay, so you've now made the decision, right?
Yeah. I'm using it in a variety of ways. So personally, my son's a senior in high school and was senior class president this year. And one of the things he wanted to do was a fundraiser for painting parking spaces. And he came to me and he's like, Mom, they've denied it for years and years. They're not going to approve it. And I said, well, maybe they haven't had a good proposal. So he used AI to search up proposals for how to propose it, manage it, and undo it. And then he presented that using that as a tool, and it was actually approved. So I was like,
There
interesting.
you go.
So
That's-
that was pretty cool. And then I've used it to do headshots instead of hiring a photographer for $400 for $6.99. I used an app and have some new headshots that I have tested with my friends, and they're like, yep, that looks like you, that works. So like, okay. And then at work, we're using it as a springboard for when I need ideas generated for questions for evaluations or, you know, something to write. And then of course it does require critical thinking, I think, to then go, where did that answer come from? And why did they, you know, really think about, is that a good response, or should I rework that? And then our company is using it in lots of ways. Our LMS, of course, curates courses like you were talking about. So we use it for that. There's some automated coaching that you can do with an AI prompt. So that's kind of interesting. We're playing with that a little bit. And we use the language stuff like Lisa does. And we also, in our business, which I'm not really privy to, they're doing some things with it, as well as we have some online support structures, you know, so we have the automated chat bots and that kind of stuff. And we have, they're using it in other ways, I think, to make decisions about the business. But I'm not privy to that. And we're struggling too, because we are also a financial institution. So information is very protected, and trying to figure out, you know, how do we make it available to our employees to use in certain ways, but then not have it available to them. And so a lot of things I do on my own personal computer, and then I email it to myself because I can't do it at work. And, you know, so
don't tell anybody. You can't tell anybody.
I know.
You can't do that.
People have to know that's happening, and
Yeah.
they can track it. So they could be like, Steph, don't do that. But until I get caught, I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, I reorged my team in the spring of this year, and so my year-end reviews, I had 13 of them to do, and that was all done through ChatGPT. There's no way I could write 13 good reviews that would make sense, and so I was careful about how I did it, but I got it in. You mentioned financial institution. For those of you out there that may not be in the know, financial institutions are really slow to adopt this stuff. So for example, I had a gentleman come into my office today, and he sat down and he said, hey, really appreciate the work your team's doing, your tech team, around executive recruiting. We've landed on a solution. We'd like to go forward for funding, and we'd like to go live in Q1 of 2026. And I said, okay, number one, the funding process will take us at least to January, if not February or March. And I said, because your tool has AI in it, we're at least 18 months away from go live. He said, 18 months. And I said, yeah, it has to go through our change execution governance, our AI governance group, our cyber team. There are more acronyms I could spit at you and all of these things, because banks and the regulators are really afraid of AI and where the data is going to go. So if you have thoughts of going to work for a bank to change their technology of AI, it's probably the wrong place to go. We're still using paper and pencils. So you know, but AI is interesting. And I don't have any of the research with me. They talked about it a lot at the conference, and I've been meaning to dig into it. But there was a lot of mentions around sociology, our civilization, and those that embrace and those that don't embrace AI, and what that might do to a society. And it's interesting to think about that, in that AI skills versus non-AI skills, meaning the usage of to automate or to embed or to help you think through really changes a lot of dynamics for folks. So something to research in your time.
Do you think that parallels the implementation of or the availability of personal computing back in the early 80s or late 70s? Where same sort
You're
of
talking
thing,
about that
right?
curve? You're talking
That
about
curve, yeah, where people adopted or didn't adopt or couldn't afford or didn't have purpose for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're in for an interesting revolution because if you talk to people that use ChatGPT versus people that don't use ChatGPT and the differences that they're using it for in their life and the conversation, you could see it already. You write it takes you 2 hours to write a year-end assessment where ChatGPT, once it's fed, can do it and you can review it in probably 15 minutes. And it's good enough. It's got all the facts in it that I need it because I've written a prompt and had ChatGPT then help me make the prompt better through questions it asked me back. And I do that 2 or 3 times. And then once I get the prompt, I then leverage that prompt to write all of the reviews. Just that conversation and the time that I have difference from my peers that's spread that across society. It's going to be interesting to see. So let's talk through a couple stats here. Again, I asked ChatGPT last 6 months. Here are the stats. This one came from April of this year. 3 in 4 businesses. This came from HR Dive. I believe it's a magazine. 3 in 4 business leaders are restructuring roles to integrate AI. We're doing it. I'm doing it. 85% of HR leaders expect major changes in 25 from AI adoption. Already seeing it. We're talking about some big, hairy things at work that I can't talk publicly about. And one of the things I asked in a meeting was, okay, this is great, but we haven't factored in the impact of AI over the next 6 to 12 months. And we probably need to do that assessment and restructure our strategy accordingly so that we're not building something that's throwaway work. Let's build so it makes sense. And then the last is 92% of HR leaders are encountering a lot of resistance at work around policies. I know we are. I'm also seeing it. People walk around with cell phones. They probably have ChatGPT, but when you start talking about it at work, people they lose their minds. So there's sort of a really interesting dichotomy. But I want to shift gears really quickly. How many of you see skills as an intersection at work? Anybody see the skills initiative, or we kind of done with that?
No, I think there's still gaps that exist.
I have a couple. I have a couple large clients trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, upskilling has been a buzzword for the last 10 years, but I haven't seen a company that's figured it out because I always ask, well, what skills does the company need? And they're like, well, we don't know about that. We just want to know what skills our people have. And then I ask the next question, are these skills that people self-report or skills you actually observe? Like, oh, it's skills that people self-report. I'm like, okay, how accurate is that skills assessment? And so I haven't seen anybody who's actually gone anywhere with upskilling and that kind of stuff because, as we know, skills learned without application are just that. They're just skills. So that's fortunately the Coast Guard's not chasing future skills. Again, based on our mission being on border security, we pretty much have a clear idea. Drive a boat, board a boat, send the people back. We kind of know the skills. We know the skills that it takes and what to get there. So unfortunately, we're not going to be chasing upskilling for the Arctic mission because that's another big thing. I'm like, what skills do you need for the Arctic mission? We just need icebreakers and we need people to man icebreakers. So it's pretty simple. We don't need some new set of Arctic skills for whatever the Arctic initiative is. So that's what I'm seeing, with skilling here at the Coast Guard.
But it seems to be at a very strategic, like a framework, not like a task analysis, but they're trying to, several organizations shift from being competency focused to skill focused.
Yes.
Yeah. Apples to apples.
Yeah. So when Lisa and I worked together last, we were doing the framework shift to competencies, the Lominger model, and that's how we got started. And then I feel like the world skipped over capabilities and went straight to skills. And I never felt like we figured any of that out to this point. And I know that's probably the wrong thing to say with a group of learning and talent and HR professionals, but I feel like we didn't learn the first two times. And I'm struggling with the skills initiative. And I think part of the big struggle is AI is moving this thing so fast because so many skills that we once had are gone. My buddy at lunch today was telling me he was working with an IT company. They were building some code in, and his job was to work with these coders to get them the training they needed to build the code, to test the code. He said within 6 months, the skills they taught them were no longer viable or needed because AI had figured out how to do it. So what they were doing is the coders, instead of reviewing and testing their own code, were just passing it through a Gen AI filter, which was fixing it for them to the point where it was fixing it on the fly, and they never had to tell the bot to do it. So I think in some parts of the world, skills are moving faster in terms of the change needed than other places. Scott, I think you've hit on one that's probably a little slower. You know, if you're going into the Arctic, you need to know it's cold and how to wear your gloves and break ice.
Yeah.
But I think so, you know, again, I pulled up some stats, like 40% of our employees are boosting programs to upskill employees. We'll see what that looks like in the long run. Lots of focus on internal talent development. I will tell you and brag on Truist. Truist as an organization has done a great job. Question, how many of you, and if you know the answer, don't spout it out because I've been talking about this, but Truist, what percent do you think last year we hired internal from our internal development programs? So how many Truist employees took jobs last year internally? What percent?
70%.
That would be awesome. I would write that paper. It was high, almost 50%.
That's
So
great.
every job that was open, 50% of those jobs were filled with internal employees. We have focused a lot on our internal culture, our internal development, and I think that's one of the bright shining things at Truist. And the last bullet here, Training Magazine, you know, strategic journey maps connect employees to company strategy. You know, we have a large L&D team that's doing this by hand now. I can tell you, once I get a piece of technology in that I really want, I won't need them to do that anymore because it will do that for them on the fly. So I think AI skills, things are shifting, and HR has to figure out, learning has to figure out how to stay at that table. So let's move into something, you know, actions to take. I want to talk about a couple of things. You know, 6 of them to be precise. You know, to me, I have found these are the items that have kept me at the table, kept peers of mine that have been successful at the table. And I wanted to just share them with you. But before I get into it, just sort of in the chat, or you can shout it out. When you talk to the business, so Stephanie, when you're talking to the business, what are the things that they find valuable? What's valuable to the business when you're talking to them?
Well, they're looking for skills, of course, but mostly around communication, because they want people to be able to communicate more effectively so that you can get rid of all the noise and cut to the chase. So gaining velocity in their communications and decision making. The hard to have conversations, that's a big topic right now, where people who, instead of avoiding, really need to have those tough conversations, whether it be around performance or around disagreement on ideas and whatnot. So those are the two that come to the mind off the top of my head, but
Okay,
there's, yeah.
cool. Ani, and anything that you're seeing when you talk to the business, what are they looking for? Do we lose her?
No,
Oh.
I'm still here. So another reason I joined these is because I want to hear what's going on now, because I left my organization about 6 months ago, and obviously AI is going so quickly. So I was interested to see what it is like for you all that are working for an organization or still diligently pursuing your own interests in it. Um, so I do agree that those communication skills and managing a team was what was prevalent 6 months ago for my organization, and getting results through the team was very, very, very needed in order to continue to meet the goals of the organization.
Mhm.
When you were talking to the business, 6 months
Mhm.
ago, because I
Yep.
think a lot of that hasn't changed. When you're sitting there with a business leader and you're trying to communicate to them, what things do they find valuable? How did
For
you
my
connect with them?
organization, talent development was very valuable. Our team members knowing that this was a long-term career or could be a long-term career and not a summer job or a seasonal job. So we spent a lot of, I don't want to say time, but a lot of energy showing the route, showing the path. And the
Yep.
same thing, we had AI in our learning tech that would generate the learning path based on what you wanted to do. Didn't matter what your current job was. So we had a lot of people staying. As long as you could get them to stay the first 30 days, they would stay on average 5 years, right? So that was very, very helpful. They went to different avenues by their choice. So if they worked on the shop floor, they could then work in the warehouse. Or if their goal was to get to be a support function, we had those pathways crafted for them. So that was very valuable. And the other thing that was very valuable that we brought in was the DISC profile to help with communication, right? How you and your style can impact others, and how you do need to be aware of other styles in order to get to the end result quicker.
Mhm.
That's great. Yeah, this next slide is something I've been working with my team on a lot. As a support organization, we're a support organization to talent who supports the business. So we're a support to the sport. And it's oftentimes difficult for us to remember why we're doing what we're doing. We're really there to support the business who's supporting our external clients that are coming into banks or banking with us online. So for me, I think it's really important that we think, talk, and measure like the business. And you know, I always encourage my team when you're meeting with the business, you need to understand what their strategy is, what their plan is. So we know what the big enterprise strategy is. We're going to talk a minute about the critical and the alignment of that. But what's that business doing that's aligning to that enterprise strategy? Where are they going? Ask them the questions. You know, you want to talk to the business, talk time and talk money. Those are the best two things you can do. Even if it's back in the napkin math, right? It will always speak to them in volumes. And so don't say, oh, this learning program is going to change your world. Tell them financially how it's going to change the world, or time saved, or reduction of number of days in onboarding. Even if it's a macro sort of thing, the business goes, oh yeah, that's tangible to them because that's how they talk as they're reporting out profits. Headcount, FTE, goals and objectives. You need to understand how they're set up and how they're structured. You need to understand what the work is that they're doing. Speed to market and industry norms. I think learning and development in a lot of places is really slow. I hear it at Truist. You're too slow. You can't keep up with us. We have an ask, and within 2 weeks, we're on to something else. We're even in banking. Which is a slow industry. I think a lot of times we get busted for speed to market. So what can we do? I've got some ideas around that I'm going to share here in a minute. And then Ani, you mentioned culture. Stephanie, you mentioned communication. Both of you did, and change. Like you got to understand what's going on. And one of the things I do is I ask to get invited to quarterly or even monthly meetings, and I have a standing slot on our retail enablement side to hear what's going on. And trust me, these folks beat me up when I'm in there, but it's worth it. It's worth the 15 minutes of pain that I have to endure to hear the 45 minutes of gold, to hear them talking, so I can bring it back to my team, and so I can talk to them about what are they struggling with and what's it actually like they're in the retail facilities. Because if I don't really understand that, then I can't really empathize with the pain that's going on. So we got to do some things differently, because if we're going to sit at the big kid table, with all the businesses, we got to start acting, thinking, talking, and measuring like the business. I mentioned strategic alignment. This is one that I often think people really miss out on. And I challenge a lot of folks in our learning space at work. If you can't tell me how a project aligns back up to the enterprise strategy, we should not be working on this.
Right.
And some of you are going, oh, I don't know how to say no to that. Well, I'm going to show you here in a second how you say no. But if you can't map things, and Lisa, look at her smiling because she has this really cool tool called an impact map. Yes, Lisa, I still use a version of that today. If you can't align it back up, even in the simplest form on the back of a napkin, you should not be working on it. We don't have the time. Remember on the last slide, speed to market, we do not have the time to work on uh, birthday parties, communication, games, and those sort of things. We have got to do the work of the business to move the needle on performance and skills. And so challenge yourselves. In a minute, we're going to talk about annual planning. This is where the rubber meets the road is in annual planning, because everything you do around planning for the business has got to tie back to whatever your strategy is. Outputs versus outcomes. I'll bet you if I did a poll on here, most all of you would say, yes, we talk about butts and seats. But I would also say that some of you are probably working on the outcomes. There's a big difference. Output is just numbers. It's just how many courses that were taken. But the outcome is, how are you impacting your organization and the performance and moving the needle? How are you changing sales? How are you reducing time? Remember back to that first slide on thinking, acting, and behaving differently with the business? This is what they want. So if you work on an organization with a call center, that's gold. If you work on an organization with sales, that's gold. Those are the easiest places to show outcomes and impact once you get your foot in the door on there. And it'll take a little bit of time to do it, but once you do that, and then you start asking for more headcount and more money, the conversation gets simpler and simpler. That's how over time I've been able to be successful asking for headcount and dollars, is because I figured out the groups in the company that really needed the help, that were easily measurable, and then I started demonstrating those things there and made a name for myself. I mentioned annual planning. This is one that I worked on and really crafted hard when I was at Charter Spectrum Enterprise. In fact, this is touting this is actually doing his own company, but this is a framework I would offer up to you if your organization's on a sort of a calendar, January to December year, how you think about annual planning. Most people think about annual planning in October and November, but you got to start much earlier. And so for me, our model was always starting in August. We would get together as a group in our department. We would gather up the company information we could gather from strategies, from analyst reports, and meetings with the senior most executives. And we would simply ask the question for the next year. So 2025, we're going to ask about 2026. Based on the current strategy, what are the top 5 things you're going to do? And they would go through and they would talk, and we would write this stuff down. And then we would say, we want to get with your lieutenants next. And between September and October, we would sit with their lieutenants and say, your big boss said, you're going to do these 5 things. What's that translate to into the business performance? And then let's start tying deliverables at a very high level to this, and some success metrics to this. And then let's assign some rudimentary hours of deliverables. So we would go out and use ATD hours or Chapman Alliance numbers, and we had our own template that we would build, and we would say, based on your ask of 5 items, which usually always turn into 10, this is what it looks like. Does this sound right? And they would say, yes, yes, yes. And we would say, that's great. As a collective company, you have asked for 50,000 hours, and we have 10 instructional designers who can do about 2,000 hours a year. So with our 10 instructional designers and our 2,000 hours, we got what, 20,000 hours. So we got a problem. So we moved into build by bots in about the November time frame, as we were getting ready to go into the budgeting time. And the executives would start horse trading. They would start saying, we really don't need to do that, but we need to do that. Hey, let's combine these 2 together and share hours. And so we would come out of it in December with a finalized not only budget of build by bots, but also a pretty solid project plan with FTEs aligned to and some basic 80% deliverables that then we would call our annual plan. And then the project management teams would go into January with firmed up plans. And January 1 would drop and we would start on the first project because we had calendared this thing out. Now, I will tell you, this did not happen the first year. This took us 3 years to get really good at, but I can tell you by year 2, when we had this conversation with the executives, they went, okay, I get it. I understand. Even some of them said, well, I'm just going to hire it out to a consultant. I said, fantastic. We have some of the finest consultants. Let me get you some numbers. And we started looking at numbers and comparing it. And they said, well, they might be able to match and maybe beat the speed internally. They don't have the internal knowledge on some things. And it's a challenge to get this and that. So let's move some stuff external, but let's keep the bulk of it internal. We had a fantastic conversation. So I offer this up as a great framework to not only learn the business, spend a lot of time with your CFO, but also the senior executives. So I'm going to pause. Any thoughts on this? Any questions?
I'd love to see more organizations do this. We're finding like this year, we're just getting traction because a lot of clients are just, getting their budgets approved and kind of getting ready to get going on something. So April, May for a January fiscal year.
Yeah. We just got our goals finalized in where are we? Late in mid-April, which is crazy.
Yep.
We're doing this at the Coast Guard, but it's a lot of, well, if we're gonna hire 5,000 people next year, where would you train them, and how would you do it? And it becomes a lot of back of the napkin math efforts that may or may not come true, but they have to, as part of Force Design 28, they have to figure out do that. So they've been looking at purchasing a defunct college's campus to make a training center. They might do that. They might lease it. That's the other thing. It's like we can't build one ourselves because it takes 3 years to build something in the Coast Guard or the military. So you have to figure out, do things differently to get stuff done. So I thought first, like, oh, Coast Guard is more reactive than proactive, but on the other hand, they're trying to figure out stuff for 28. So there is some work of that. And in my role, they're always asked, if we had to get more people through this training, could you guys do it? And I'm like, sure. We either need more instructions or we take some of this stuff out of training because it's not needed per se. You can't have everything. And they're like, oh, okay. So they're pretty reasonable on those kind of stuff. But this is actually the kind of key thing. You only have so many hours of time in a year. Pick what you're going to do. And then we're always asking, what are we not going to do? Because we're not getting more people to train all these. We're gonna train 5,000 more people. We're not gonna get any more training people. So you have to, we have to ask them, what is not to train? What is not necessarily a priority of the Coast Guard anymore? And we'll postpone that training for a year, and we'll deal with those consequences a year from now or 2 years from now. So that's always the bigger questions that are happening with the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
Well, right, and everything's so fluid. What do you do with the requests that come in the middle of the year that pop up out of nowhere?
We actually found with this model, Lisa, we've got a lot less of that. And when we did get it, we actually had by year 3, our senior product executive at Charter Spectrum Enterprise, he was hilarious. He'd come in and he'd go, oh my gosh, there's this new technology. We got to do it. We're getting our shorts beat by AT&T. We got to do this thing. And I looked at him and I said, and I raised my eyebrows. You go, yeah. What am I giving up? What am I not going to do? You got to train the business, right? You want to be a big boy, a big girl at the big kid table. This is what the business does every day. They have to make trade-offs. And so learning and development, this isn't America's Got Talent. We pull rabbits out of our hat. We only have so much money and so much time and so much, dedication to things. And so that's part of the education. So again, if we're going to be the big kids at the table, we've got to pick the things that align to the strategy. We got to focus on outcomes and performance. We've got to be able to work through an annual planning cycle that gets us proactive instead of reactive. And the other thing that I have been pushing recently is this idea around you got to do tests and learns. We do not have time for full rollouts. We have got to do small pilots. And
Mhm.
what I find when you do that with the business is they get that taste early, and to them it feels like it's done, but it's done to that group. And then you can drive engagement, you can drive a lot of it's simpler around change management when you're doing things. So right now we're looking at some big technologies coming out, and I've already started saying we're going to build pieces, we're going to put them into small groups, we're going to measure it, we're going to learn from it, and we're going to effectively spin the cycle quickly as we're going through test and learn pilots. The other thing that I have found is how we talk to the business. I actually think there's a formula. And all of us know this formula. I guarantee you, everybody on this call knows this formula because everybody has been a part of and been involved with and got suckered into this formula. In storytelling, formulas are really, really, really important. How we tell the story on the front end to get the project, and the back end to talk about the successes, which most of us don't do. We don't do it very, very well, myself included, is here's the formula. It's the Disney formula. Every single one of you has seen a Disney movie, right? Once upon a time, the villain shows up, and I want the song comes on, and we can all sing it because our kids, depending on the era, sang that song. The adventure begins. There's a villain, the shenanigans, the darkest hour. There's a fight, the hero wins, and happily ever after. And what I will tell you is there are short 5 bullet point versions of this story you can find, or this formula that you can find. Try it next time. And you will find that you can bring people in. I watched a video of a guy talking about the best way to start a talk, and he said one of the best ways is once upon a time. And as soon as you say that, look at that. Stephanie leaned in and she looked up from the camera. We're all suckers for that phrase. Try it next time. Once upon a time.
It's
There was this
ingrained in
group
our
that had a
psyche.
request.
Yeah.
That's right. So leverage the power of psychology, right? I will tell you this, another thing that has really helped me too is you've got to tell the successes of your team. I do it every week. Every single week, I send my boss an email. It's usually Friday late or Saturday morning, and it says, here's everything the team worked on. And it's a very long list, but I give her 7 bullets of the successes of the week. And if I can quantify it or qualify it, she loves it because she can take that on. Because if I'm not telling the story of success, not only of my team, but what's going on in the department, no one else is doing it. And she can't see that incremental process. So if you want a pro tip, figure out a way to tell success story even better. So I'm going to pause because we're kind of at a transition point in the presentation. How does this resonate? Any thoughts?
We had a podcast series we called Once Upon a Time, and that's how we framed the project case studies.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I did a workshop for my team about how to create a success story, because if I asked people what they did, they said we update training, and I'm like, Trump is not going to keep you if you tell your job is not very secure if your story is I update training. So it was I put it into simple things. Name the business you work for and how you're improving performance. You're updating the training. You're actually making the training scenario based or performance based or reflecting the current performance in the field. Say it like what you're doing, and and then of course the last part of the success is, and as a result, the training is better received. It's more efficient. It's more effective. And they were just like, oh, what a grand idea. And I'm like, yeah, these are the kind of things that'll benefit you now. And if you have to look for a job, because everybody's going to ask you, tell me about a time when you worked on a project that had results, no matter what role you're in. And so you have to be able to tell that story. And so it's the same basic. I like this format. It's like just another way to tell the success story, but I had to come up with that one because again, again, people said I update training. I'm like, that's not value add.
Yeah. we had a similar conversation on my team. Somebody in a team meeting said, I was on the elevator, the doors open, and our CEO got on. It's a real true story because he's in the building and you see him a lot. And I said, so what did you say? And she said, I didn't say anything. I said, oh, you missed it. You so missed it. That was your 30-second opportunity to tell the CEO, ask him how he was doing, because he's going to say, so what do you do for the company? I know this because I've talked to him. And I said, that was your opportunity to say, and Scott, you nailed it on what's the formula of success of how you support the end client. That was your shot. And so the activity that I had then all my leaders work on with their teams was the doors open, the CEO gets in, what's your 30 seconds? And I wanted to make sure everybody had their 30-second speech in case they needed it, or it was holiday time and Aunt Marcy asks you, what do you do for a living? You got it already figured out. So,
Nice.
all right. So, as I mentioned early on, I love to write in LinkedIn and would love to have all of you go out and join me in that space. But one of the things I struggled with early in my career was what's the best way to lead all of this stuff? And I've tried lots of different models and I've been through lots of different trainings. I was a situational leader. In fact, I'm certified to teach it. And I was more of the democratic leader at one point, and then I was sort of the team player leader, and then a couple of years ago, it's probably been more like 10 years ago, I landed in the servant leadership space through the scouting organization. We're a big scout family. I've got an Eagle Scout, and I got one who's almost an Eagle Scout because he can't drive a car until he's an Eagle Scout. So we have the fumes policy at our house. Our car fumes or perfumes until you become an Eagle. So, but the scouts have the servant leadership model, and I went through some leader training. And I thought, this is really good. I really like this. And so I started adopting it into the way that I was leading, and sort of been on this journey to be a better servant leader. And so I write a lot on LinkedIn about it, and I've got several standing articles each week. One is around servant leadership principles, and one is as a servant leader, questions you should be asking your team. But this next part is, how do we take this? How are we going to be leaders at the table? But how are we going to then help our teams execute on this? If you're a leader of people or you're a leader of teams, I feel like right now in history and time, the best leadership and the one that works the best is really around servant leadership. And it's really this idea. And when you're in it for a while, it becomes, I agree with Robert Greenleaf, who is the proposed founder of servant leadership, but it's really the natural feeling that one wants to serve first, and then it makes a conscious choice that brings one to aspire to lead. He went on to say, it's a model, it's a new model, which puts serving others as the number one priority. Servant leadership emphasizes increased service to others. It's a holistic approach. It promotes sense of community and sharing in the power of decision-making power. Even if you read books, there's actually a lot of military former SEALs that have written books. Extreme Ownership is a popular one out there. I can't remember the guy's name who wrote it, but basically the backbone of his leadership is servant leadership. And he talks about you got to lead from the front sometimes, and lead from the back, and lead from the middle. But really born out of this idea that I'm here to serve my team, and in it, I will tell you, this is a model that takes longer to put in place. As a new leader in a team, it's not something that happens day one. This is something that happens 6 months in, 12 months in, but it's the type of slow burn and roll up that when it's in place, it's really, really hard for others to knock it down. You really do a great job of empowering your team. So how is it different from traditional leadership? So servant leadership on the left really empathizes empathy and connection, stuff we need today. COVID was a great time. AI change, big time. Layoffs. Now is the time for this as a model versus control and assertiveness and domination. The left is providing power to the teammate, right is taking it away. On the left, a desire to serve. On the right, ambition to lead. It's about self on the right, and it's about others on the left. Servant leadership, it's a lot like fly fishing or a lot of other hobbies. You never quite ever arrive, but you always strive to arrive. Servant leader, it's an ongoing lifestyle where sort of the traditional leadership, it's you implement it, it's a once and done. Like it's your way or the highway. And what I have found as I've researched most of the leadership styles, most of them are on the right. Most of them are about the leader. And on the left, the servant leadership model is really about making sure it's team first. So who's doing this well? And is this just a fad or not? Well, Susan Dwozik, I think is how you pronounce it. I'm probably butchering it, but CEO of YouTube, talks around, 90% of Google's present income is in direct correlation to the decisions and initiatives she did around servant leadership model. Cheryl Batchelder, a former CEO of Popeyes, if you know anything about that company, massive turnaround at Popeyes, and her style was servant leadership, and the value of the company quadrupled during her time under her leadership. Jack Welch, most folks don't think of Jack Welch as a servant leader, but there were elements of his style that were definitely servant leadership in nature, and really transformed GE from a company around appliances and light bulbs to a multinational corporation with really a broad spectrum of services. So we really know what servant leadership is, but let's dig into sort of the basic 10 principles. And so if you're struggling to figure out your place as a leader, and you feel like servant leadership is for you, these are really the 10 things I would tell you to focus on. The first is you got to be a good listener. And I will tell you, I am a horrible listener. We could be talking. Scott can probably attest. We'll be in a conversation, and I have already thought through what my response is going to be. I've tuned everybody else out because I'm going to come to the table. That is not a servant leader. A servant leader listens first, responds second. And so for me, in my own development, I have to pause, and I have to think, and I have to listen intently with what the other person is saying, because I want to understand the tone. I want to understand the context, the inflection. That's really important. And what helps me become a good listener is video. I need to be able to see your face, whether it's in person or on video. So that's really, really important to me. The second, empathy. Like I said, COVID taught us empathy in a big way. Remember COVID, all of our kids were at home. We were trying to work out of one corner, the internet was crashing. We were wiping down Amazon packages in between meetings. And then we're still trying to run teams and be empathetic by why work's not getting done, but they're really doing the same thing. And it was just a big struggle. And so it's really around a feeling for people that we have to have differently. And we can't turn a blind eye to their problems or their issues or their emotions. And we had to figure out ways to help them resolve it by sort of getting in the moment with them. And for some, that's easy. And for others, that's really hard. Heal those around you. Those that are great servant leaders, when they're around individuals, those folks, they feel like through the conversations and the actions of that leader, it helps them with problems they're dealing with and things and struggles they have. And I would tell you the greatest line that I've learned in this space is, how can I help you? What can I do to help you? Now, y'all are shaking your head. For me, the pro tip and the one that really got me is, and it wasn't just asking my team. It was easy to say to my folks, hey, how can I help? That's my job. I'm the boss. When I started asking my boss, that was a game changer. I end every single one-on-one with my boss. I say, how can I help you? And every time she stops and she looks at me and she smiles and she says, you ask me that every single time. And it gives her a moment to pause and say, you know what, Matt, I'm working on this project. I may not have the time. Can you give it a once over eye to really help me move through and be successful? Right? That's a form of me helping and healing her, just like I'm helping and healing my team. The fourth is we got to be aware. A great example today was one of my leaders. He pinged me and he said, can we talk? And so we got on the video together and he said, hey, so-and-so just came back from maternity leave, is really struggling because Her husband is going to go out for an arm surgery. He's going to be without use of his arm for 4 weeks, and he's not going to be able to lift things more than 10 pounds. They have a brand new baby, and they have a 5-year-old. And so he said, I know this because she's talked about it. Is it okay, even though she's supposed to be in the office 4 days a week, is there a way that we can offer her 4 weeks out? She can still do all of her work from home. What can we do? And I was so proud of him for doing this, right? He was so in tune and aware, and he's learning this for what his people need. And so he's figuring out ways to build up, his the folks that report to him. Persuading without being forceful. This for some is an easier journey. It's a hard journey for me. My personality is, again, I like to solve for it, but I have to understand that who I am and the title that I have and the position I have, I got to be really careful. And so I've worked on ways to ask questions, probe with curiosity versus coming out and making strong recommendations. And so I work on not being bossy. I also have a cadre of people that I go to on a regular basis, and I say, hey, you were in that meeting. I'm really trying to work on not being this way. How did that come across? And they give me some great feedback. So find those folks that can help give you that mirror that you need back. Number 6, conceptualizing communicative vision. If you're a people leader on this call, do you have a mission, vision, values of your own, of your team? If you don't, you need one. So you got the company version, you've got your department version, you need one of your own. And I will tell you the pro tip here. Yeah, Scott, you're right. Ask your team for feedback. That's awesome. But a pro tip on this one is you need a team motto. I make stickers every year with our team motto, and I mail them out and I hand them out. Our motto this year is everything is figure outable, because that directly ties to our PMV of the team, of the department, and of the organization. It's on, if I have my laptop, I'd show you, it's on the back of my laptop. Last year was, yes, we've got this. We took the comma out. Horrible grammar because we didn't want to pause. It was intentional. Yes, we've got this. Provide something for your team to rally around in the vision space. Channel foresight. One of the greatest things that wise and seasoned leaders can do is help their team see what's coming. If you're not seasoned and you've been around and you're a new leader, SWOT analysis, SWOT, or a pest analysis, which is a kissing cousin. These are great tools to help you think about this, and you can use this in your own. And people will think, they're like, "Wow, how did you think through that?" Well, you did the work ahead of time. I'll give you a great example of providing foresight. Truist is a bank. We saw the election happen. We knew there was probably going to be some bumpy roads. And in January, I started talking to the team. I said, if things start hitting the skids, if the economy changes and the bank starts talking about what are we going to do, this is our opportunity to double down on a couple of things. We're going to talk a lot. So great change management principle is making sure your folks can ask the questions that they need to ask. And the second thing around change management, at least it's change management principle for me, is as a team, we're going to talk great about each other when the other person's not around. If Scott's on my team and he is not in the room, I'm going to say, Scott is really doing a great job on this project. Because as we're thinking about what's coming with the company, it's my job as a leader to predict on some level what's coming, and then help the team and get them ready for things. And so for us, change management and talking great about each other when no one's around is worked out well. Stewardship. This really is around accountability and helping folks understand the mission and the responsibility that they have. And it's my job as a servant leader to do that empathetically and in a way that's, as folks need to receive that information and tailor that message accordingly. Commit to the growth of people. Just like I ask every single time I meet with my folks, how can I help? Whether it's in the hallway or whether it's online. I'm also talking to them about, are you taking that hour out every week for your own development? This here for me, this is part of my development. I went on a journey this year to say, I'm going to spend more time giving back. I'm going to do more talks. I'm going to do more conferences where I talk. So I've been a guest speaker at UNC Charlotte. I'm here today. I've been on ATD. I've been Brandon Hall. I've got some things coming up. I'm writing a lot of more LinkedIn. That's my commitment to growth, and my boss is sponsoring it. What are you doing? What are we doing for our folks as servant leaders, for our folks at work? And then last is we got to build a community. And like I said before, this is something that takes a long time. Servant leadership isn't going to show a lot of fruit in the first month. It's going to show a lot of fruit in the first year. And I guarantee you, if you stick with it, you will outshine other leaders of other styles faster, because they're going to start seeing your team and how you interact as a leader with your team, how they interact with you, the work that gets done, the high fives that happen, which is different because you don't see that with different leadership styles. So I offer that up to you. And sort of my last challenge to you is this. So as you think about the scale of yourself, of servant leadership, you don't have to put this in chat. You don't have to say it out loud, but think about it. Where are you on the scale? If you say, you know what, hey, today, Matt, I'm a 3. I'm going to encourage you later on today to spend some time today or tomorrow. What do I have to do of there's 10 things that Matt talked about to get me to good? Let's just move it one number, right? As a leader, even if I don't have people, but I want to be a servant leader in my home, my family, my community, what do I have to do to move from a 3 to a 4 or 4 to a 5? What's that look like? So that's my challenge to you all.
That's good.
What questions you got?
Back to that list of 10 things. Are those things you look at, or do you already know all those things? And how do you go, how do you focus on, do you keep this list in mind, or you already have it memorized?
Yeah. I'm weird. I usually pick one thing a week, and that's my thing. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you know what I've been working on over the last 6 months. I have to stagger some of my stuff because some of it is real, that it happens, and I talk about the frustration. And then what am I working on as a leader and myself? And then I offer a challenge to the reader. So you'll see a lot of that, but I'll pick something every week to work on.
Thanks.
This week is patience, if you're wondering.
I didn't realize, Matt, that the Boy Scouts followed servant leadership. That's interesting. My husband's a scoutmaster too, and he went away to some training, but he didn't mention it was servant leadership. He just was. They were singing songs and doing team building, and he'd never heard of all that stuff, so he was amazed.
Yeah, a bunch of grown adults singing songs as adults is hilarious in that setting. If your husband did Wood Badge,
That's what it was. Yeah.
then it was servant leadership based. That's a national.
Cool.
That's a national program.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, to me, one thing that caught my attention really in servant leader discussion, excuse me, servant leader discussion, Matt, is so the slide you had 1 or 2 before this. You don't have to go back or anything, but it was on the left. It was like servant leader, and the other one was more traditional leader. And I was looking at that, thinking about my own career. So I spent 20 years as a submarine officer. And I honestly believe that at least in that period of time, which ended 24 years ago, during that period from like the 80s to the early 2000s, servant leadership, it's like a super concept that I actually kind of practiced, but I honestly believe it was career limiting in the military. At least then, what may well be wildly different today.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree that there aren't times where I have to give a command.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. We're in the middle of something, and today was a great example. And I was on with one of my incredibly mature leaders, and we're going through some stuff, and I just had to come out and say, look, I got to make a decision on this, and here's the decision. We could talk about it as an after fact, but we're in the moment. We got to have to do this right now because of where we are. And it didn't feel good, but she understood why. But for me on the back end, let's talk about why I made that decision, how'd that feel, and what were sort of the things I saw on the horizon that made me make that decision. So, that after action concept is big with me.
Which makes perfect sense. I mean, one of Patrick Lencioni's book, I can't remember which one it was, but talks, all kinds of talks about leadership. And one of them is that the group has to understand what how the group comes to a decision. And it may well be that the leader says, I hear you. This is what I've decided. This is not a vote. This is not a consensus. This is not, we love each other building and stuff like that. As long as the team recognizes that, okay, the decision was made, I understood that, and I will support that moving forward, which is kind of what it sounds like, in this instance you just described. That was the, afterwards discussion. This is the decision, this was the decision, and here's how we got here, and this is how we move forward.
Yep. Yeah, Stephanie, that's a good book.
I hear you're saying is, so you have to make decisions, but I think probably in that empathy is taking the time to explain your decisions to your team. Otherwise you come across as the, I just know best.
Yeah.
That doesn't help. You want to model the leadership behaviors that your future leaders should model. And again, they pick up everything from, as a leader, what you do. And if you're successful doing that, then they're going to do it. I think that traditional leadership is not because it's the best model. It's what they see successful leaders do. So they think that's how to do it. And there's another path to being a successful leader, but most people just don't see that. So they often people pick up bad habits because their leaders do those things.
Yeah. I was on a call today. We are changing up how some of the operations team handles some of the LMS admin stuff. And I have a young leader in the manager of tech and reporting that reports to me. And we were in this meeting, and I said to him, hey, I need you to come up with a fairly 3 to 5 bulleted list of what we're going to put in our learning management system, and then we're not, more importantly, what we're not going to put in our learning management system. I said, how you phrase it is going to be really important, but this is sort of the mission. This is what I need you to do. And he said, I don't know how to do that. And I said, so let's talk about that. I could have answered the question. I knew the answer to the question, right? Because I've done it before. My boss made me create that list, and I know the struggle. It's easy for me to say, here are your 5 things, and you don't do it this way. And what was interesting is on the call was another leader of mine, very seasoned, and she ended up calling me later. She's like, why didn't you just tell him? You know the answer. I'm like, because this leader's got to figure it out. And we've got plenty of time. And even if it takes them a week, that's okay. But as servant leaders, we got to give our folks the space and the time to fail safely, fail in a way that they learn. Because I know more about riding a bike from falling off of it than I do from staying on it. How can I help? What's on your mind? What questions you got?
I think it's having the time to have that patience.
Yeah.
No, I think you were helpful with the actions to take, annual planning of the art of saying no. I think that is something that really resonated with me tonight. So thank you for that gift.
Good. Yeah, we say no at work. We just say no. And why? Here's why. And it, you got to get your leaders in comfortable with that. Relationships are important. Having coffee with them, understanding what their pain points are. But ultimately, they say no more than they say yes every day, and so
True.
how you get there is important.
Well, and bringing it all the way back to the beginning, AI is not going to replace people leadership.
No.
You can't. I don't think there's any chatbot that's going to help with any of these things per se. So it's kind of key things is there's still key things of dealing with people and motivating people and helping people grow that won't not in the near future be with AI. Maybe it's 5 or 10 years from now that can help you do things, but that's the key thing is, and that's what I've often heard is use AI to save time on tasks. So as a leader, you can do these things.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Lisa, I don't know. You said you had some experience with some of the AI automated voice stuff. For me, I find that it's very efficient, but it does not have the same resonance in the voice or the authenticity. It doesn't come through like it does when you're talking to a person. So for that reason, I think it's a great tool, but it's not an ultimate solution for
everything.
communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So depending on the context and the messaging and
Yeah.
you have to make some decisions. Well, and some of the tools are better than others.
True.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's gonna keep getting better and better.
Probably.
Because-
Yeah.
But
Probably.
yeah, I think you have to think very carefully about the tone and messaging you're after.
Yeah. Some of what we didn't have time to talk about, it could be a whole another topic, is some of the, and I think one of our participants sort of alluded to it earlier, is the ethics involved in AI and the impact that it has, it can do a lot of good, and then it's a little bit scary but that's true of any tool that we have, right? The internet's good and it's a little scary. So that's a whole nother thing, is how do we contribute to the good ethical management of AI, and keep people honest and figure out all the trickery and deception and spam, that kind of stuff.
Stephanie, to that, and everybody who's interested in that aspect, just want to draw your awareness to, so ISPI has, over the last probably 6 to 8 months, started an initiative focusing on AI for performance improvement. And it's really growing, looking at that. Looking at AI as so much more than a tool, but what does the implementation look like from a performance standpoint, from an ethics standpoint? It's that very broad look at it. So I would say, I would suggest, just kind of stay tuned to the ISPI emails and stuff like that, to kind of get in, with our merry little band, on, developing viewpoints and, what does it mean to deploy this in a helpful and meaningful manner, as opposed to let's chat GPT it and pretend everything's great.
Yeah. I had that battle with my son's Spanish teacher a couple of weeks ago. I thought he did the right thing. He was working on a project, but it was 10 o'clock at night, and he had to take some English statements and translate them to Spanish. And so he did that on paper. And then he said, I'm going to ask Google Translate, did I do it right? And he did. And so then we printed it out, put it up. He went to school. I thought it looked fantastic. I would have given him 100%. The teacher said, did you use Google Translate? And Andrew said, I'm a scout. First law of scouts is a scout is trustworthy. Yes. And the teacher said, then you get an F. And Andrew said, whoa, time out. Here's how I used it. And he explained, and the teacher said, I don't care. And Andrew said, then what did you want me to do? And he said, you should have come to me. And Andrew made the wise decision to stop talking. And then by the time I got a hold of the teacher, he said the same thing. I wanted Andrew to come talk to me. I said, at 10:30 at night, you want a phone call? He said, oh, no. And I said, so how are we training our students at this school where I pay tuition to use tools of the future? He wasn't cheating. And so I think the ethics in all of this at work and life is, what are the rules of the road that we're not cheating, but we're using it wisely, and that the people that are intending harm aren't using it for harm? I think that's going to be really important.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, yeah, you can't just disband all the tools. I mean, it's like, you can't just completely take phones away from kids. There's a time and place for phones, and how do you use them responsibly?
Have you seen the app for math problems?
No.
There's an app, and it has progressed a lot, but you can work the math problem, take a photo, and it will tell you if you got it right or not. And it will tell you in your work where you got it wrong.
Do you know the
It's
app
great.
off the top of your head?
I'd have to ask my youngest because he uses it.
My
So it
husband's a math teacher,
doesn't,
that's why I asked.
it doesn't tell you how to do it. There are some that'll tell you how to do the problem. You take a picture of the problem, but this one tells you what you did in the problem wrong, which I think
In
is
terms
smart.
of the work. Yeah.
So we've
Good.
talked with Andrew, who's my youngest. You can use Alexa, but you can only use Alexa after you've done the work.
Yeah.
You can
Nice.
use that as a
Nice.
tool to check yourself.
Check yourself. That's awesome.
Yep. That's cool. Very cool.
Well, thanks everyone. We're getting up to time. We could be here
Thank you.
chatting all night, but we
Yeah.
are all busy
That was
people
a
that
good
have other
part.
things we probably need to get going to, and
Gotta eat dinner.
you gotta try not to get distracted with things. Thanks again, Matt, for sharing your wisdom. I'll continue to look forward to following your thoughtful posts on LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your journey here tonight and just every week. I, again, recommend people. That's what kind of, I wanted Matt to come speak because I wanted to hear a little bit more about the why and why is he doing this? Why and this kind of stuff. And again, hear his perspective on how does AI work in a banking industry? Not much, but it's always good to hear, hey, we're not that far,
Yeah.
we're not that far behind, or it could be worse, kind of thing. So it's good to know those kind of things. You're always feeling, sometimes people feel that, oh, I'm way behind on AI, and like, no worries. It goes back to, like, I think the analogy was with computers back in the 80s and 90s. It's that kind of thing. You're not that far behind. So thanks again. If you send me a PDF of your deck, that'd be great. I can email that out to people, and then shortly we'll have the link to the recording up on our YouTube site. I'll send that out
Thank you.
also.
Yeah.
So, as always, thanks for your participation. These sessions are always better with the insights we get from the audience. So, thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
I don't have a speaker yet for June. I'm trying to line up somebody for June. We'll see if I can get that organized, and then starting to line up speakers for September, October, November. And Stephanie gave me a good idea. Somebody to speak about the ethics of AI. That would be,
Yeah, be cool.
there's a great
like it.
topic. I just got to find somebody.
Yeah,
Hey,
maybe we could tap an ODU professor or somebody like that.
yeah, somebody, but I bet I could find somebody who
Yeah.
could tell us what's going on with the ethics of AI, especially from a
Oh.
university's perspective or a company perspective, both. So
Yeah.
let me know. Please communicate and reach out to me if you can recommend a speaker for the
I'll
ethics.
think of some. Yep. Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you
Yeah,
again.
great discussion.
Stephanie,
Great to see
Everyone,
everyone
take care.
too.
thank you.